Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. My phone rang. 3:47 p.m. I noticed the time because I just shut down my laptop, rubbing my eyes, already mentally moving on to the next responsibility. Another day measured and emails answered, deadlines chased, numbers balanced. The kind of day I'd had thousands of times before. Honest work, quiet work, the kind of work that keeps the lights on and the fridge full. I almost ignored the call. Unknown calls were usually spam, and my head was still buzzing from a conference call that ran 20 minutes over. But when I glanced at the screen and saw Dad, my thumb hesitated. He never called in the middle of the workday unless something mattered. I answered, "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" There was a breath on the other end, not the casual inhale of someone about to complain about traffic or ask a favor. This one was controlled, measured, tight. "Is your wife home?" he asked. The question landed wrong immediately. No greeting, no small talk, just that. I leaned back in my chair, frowning. "No, she's at work." "What?" Silence followed, long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. I could hear faint background noise, wind, maybe, or the low hum of a car engine. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. Firmer. "Go to your daughter's room. Check under her bed. Don't let your wife know you found it." I straightened so fast my chair legs scraped against the floor. "What?" I said. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Just do it," he replied. "Call me back. And whatever you do, don't contact your wife." My mouth opened, ready to argue, but the line went dead. I stared at the phone. For a moment, I actually laughed, one sharp breath that escaped before I could stop it. It was absurd. My father had always been direct, sure, but never cryptic, never dramatic. He was the kind of man who believed problems should be stated plainly and handled immediately. This sounded like something out of a bad movie. I set the phone down on my desk, palms flat against the wood, and shook my head. "You're overthinking it," I told myself. "He's probably confused, or stressed, or what?" I pushed the chair back and stood, pacing the small home office. The house was quiet in that familiar mid-afternoon way. No television, no music, just the distant hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock above the hallway. The sound of a normal life continuing uninterrupted. My life. I'd build it carefully, brick by brick. Early mornings, late nights, missed weekends. I worked because that's what men did, what I'd been taught to do. Provide, protect, keep things steady. My wife used to joke that I was predictable, that she always knew where I'd be and what I'd be doing. I took pride in that. Predictability meant reliability. Reliability meant safety. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, noticing my hand wasn't shaking yet. I drank it too fast, set the glass down harder than necessary. Why would my father ask about my wife's whereabouts? Why my daughter's room? And why the secrecy? I pulled my phone back out and hovered over the call log. One tap, and I could call him back, demand an explanation. Clear this up. Restore order. Instead, his words echoed again, sharper now that the house was silent. "Don't contact your wife." That part bothered me most. My wife and I shared everything, or at least I thought we did. Schedules, passwords, weekend plans. The idea that I shouldn't talk to her felt wrong, almost insulting, like an accusation without evidence. I walked down the hallway, slowly, my steps measured, as if moving too fast might break something fragile. Framed photos lined the walls, vacations, birthdays, school plays. Smiling faces, arms around shoulders, proof of a life that made sense. I paused outside my daughter's room. The door was half open, just like she always left it. She hated closed doors, so they made her feel boxed in. I pushed it open the rest of the way and stood there for a second, taking it in. Nothing looked out of place. Her bed was neatly made, stuffed animals lined up against the pillows. A half-finished art project sat on her desk, colored pencils scattered beside it. The faint smell of lavender, her favorite, hung in the air. It was a child's room. Safe. Innocent. I exhaled slowly, feeling foolish. This is nothing, I thought. Absolutely nothing. I turned away, ready to leave, when my phone buzzed in my hand. A text from my wife. "Running a little late. Might grab dinner on the way home. Love you." I stared at the message longer than necessary. "Love you," I murmured aloud, the words automatic, even though she couldn't hear them. Late nights weren't unusual. Her job had been demanding lately. New projects, new faces, new energy she seemed to bring home with her. I chalked it up to motivation. Growth. Change. Still, my thumb hovered over the keyboard. Dad called. Said something weird. Everything okay? I deleted the text before sending it. I didn't know why. I just knew my father had been very clear. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped fully into the room. The floor creaked softly beneath my weight. I crouched down, knees protesting, and rested one hand on the carpet. This was ridiculous. A misunderstanding. An old man overreacting to something harmless. Yet my chest felt tight, like I'd climbed too many stairs too fast. I stayed there for a moment, breathing, listening to the quiet house, trying to convince myself that nothing in my life was about to change. This doesn't make sense, but why does my chest feel tight? Chapter 2. The house that suddenly felt wrong. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before. I stepped out of my daughter's room and stood there, unsure of where to put my feet, like the floor might tilt if I moved too fast. The house was quiet in a way that pressed against my ears, not peaceful, not calm, just empty. I could hear the refrigerator cycling on and off, the faint tick of the clock, the hum of the air conditioning pushing air through vents I'd cleaned myself last spring. This was my house. I'd painted these walls, fixed the loose banister, replaced the cracked tile by the front door. So, why did it suddenly feel like I was trespassing? I walked toward the kitchen, my steps slow, deliberate. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. The sun slanted through the window above the sink, lighting up dust motes in the air. On the counter sat a ceramic coffee mug, hers, half full, cool now. She never left coffee unfinished. I picked it up, frowned at the faint lipstick mark on the rim. A small thing. Meaningless, probably. She'd been rushing, maybe, running late, like she said. You're reading into nothing, I told myself. Still, I carried the mug to the sink and poured it out, watching the dark liquid swirl down the drain. The smell lingered longer than I expected. Bitter. Burnt. My phone buzzed again. Another text from her. Don't wait up. I stared at the heart emoji. Why had she started using that again? There'd been a stretch where she stopped, said it felt childish. Now it was back, sudden and bright, like a performance. I locked the phone and set it face down on the counter. Get a grip, I muttered aloud. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Images floated up uninvited, her phone lighting up late at night, the screen tilted away from me. The new password she'd added for work security. The way she'd smiled more at messages than at me lately. Small things. Easily explained. Individually. Together, they felt heavier. I pushed away from the counter and headed back down the hall. Each step toward my daughter's room tightened something in my chest. I didn't want to go back in there. Didn't want to look under that bed. Because once I did, there would be no unknowing. I paused at the doorway and rested my hand on the doorframe. Just look, I whispered. Then you can stop. The room looked the same as it had minutes ago. Safe. Normal. I knelt down slowly, joints creaking, and lowered myself to the floor. The carpet smelled faintly of fabric softener and crayons. I reached under the bed blindly at first, my fingers brushing against dust and the edge of a plastic storage bin. I pulled the bin out. Art supplies. Construction paper. Stickers. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. See, I said softly to no one. Nothing. I pushed the bin aside and almost stood up. Then my hand hit something else. Smooth. Hard. Not plastic. My fingers closed around it before my brain could catch up. I pulled it out slowly, my pulse beginning to thud in my ears. It was a small black pouch. Leather. Clean. Expensive looking. Definitely not something bought for a child. I stared at it for a long second, my mouth dry. This doesn't belong here, I said aloud. The room seemed to listen. I turned the pouch over in my hands. No dust on it. The minute had been placed there recently. Carefully. Deliberately. I glanced at the door, half expecting to see someone standing there. The hallway was empty. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. I sat back on my heels and stared at the pouch like it might move on its own. My father's voice echoed in my head, tight, urgent. Check under her bed. I unzipped it. Inside was a second phone. Not an old one. Not cracked or scratched. New. Power off. I felt something cold slide through my chest. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It was lighter than mine, sleeker, the kind of phone someone buys when they don't want to trace back to them, when they want something separate, secret. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Dead battery, maybe, or intentionally kept off. I set the phone down on the carpet and rubbed my face with both hands. My heart was pounding now, hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. There's an explanation, I told myself. There has to be. Work. A surprise. Something harmless she hadn't told me yet. But my mind betrayed me, lining up memories I hadn't asked for, her stepping outside to take calls, lowering her voice. Her irritation when I picked up her phone by mistake. The way she'd laughed once and said, "God, you're so nosy," when I asked who she was texting. I'd laugh too. I wasn't laughing now. I picked the phone up again, holding it like it might burn me. I imagined her kneeling here, sliding it under the bed when she heard the front door open. Choosing this room because it was the one place I rarely went. Because it was safe. Because it was hidden by innocence. My stomach twisted. "This doesn't belong to our daughter," I said louder this time. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I stood up slowly, the room spinning just a little. The walls felt closer than before. I tucked the pouch back under my arm and looked around, suddenly suspicious of everything. The closet, the desk, the nightstand. How long had my house been holding things I didn't know about? I checked my watch. Still hours before my wife would be home. Too much time, and not enough. I slipped the pouch back under the bed, exactly where I'd found it, pushing it into the shadow. My hands were steady now, but my chest felt hollow. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the house breathe, torn between relief and terror. Because now I knew something was wrong, and knowing meant I couldn't pretend anymore. Chapter 3, Proof You Can't Unsee. I waited 5 full minutes before pulling the pouch out again. 5 minutes of standing in the hallway, staring at the wall like it might explain things if I stared hard enough. 5 minutes of telling myself to put it back, forget it, go finish some work, pretend this day was still ordinary. My heart kept hammering anyway, impatient, like it already knew the truth and was tired of waiting for me to catch up. "Just look," I whispered. "Then you'll know." My hands shook as I knelt beside the bed again. I slid the pouch out and sat cross-legged on the carpet, like a child about to open a present. The comparison made me sick. I unzipped it fully this time. The phone slid out easily. Underneath it, folded neatly, were printed photos. Not many, just enough. I stared at the top one, my vision narrowing until the rest of the room blurred. It took my brain a second to register what I was seeing. A hotel room, white sheets, a familiar hand resting on a stranger's chest. Her hand. I knew it by the small scar near her thumb, the one she got years ago cutting vegetables too fast. I kissed that scar more times than I could count. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, no, no." I flipped to the next photo with trembling fingers. Another angle. Another moment. Her face this time, relaxed, open, smiling in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Not tired. Not distracted. Alive. Something inside me collapsed quietly, like a support beam snapping in a house that hadn't realized it was already burning. I dropped the photos and pressed my palms into my eyes, breathing hard. The room felt too bright, too sharp. Every color screamed at me. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia or insecurity. This was proof. My hands fell to my sides, numb. My thoughts scattered, then slammed back together, replaying scenes I'd dismissed over the past year like a cruel highlight reel. Her coming home later and later, tossing her keys louder than necessary. Her irritation when I asked how her day was. The way she'd changed her tone with me, shorter, sharper, like patience had become optional. And the confidence. God, the confidence. She'd started wearing it like armor. Walking into rooms with her shoulders back, chin high. Laughing at jokes she didn't used to find funny. Correcting me in front of people. Looking at me, sometimes like I was behind her. Like she'd outgrown me. I thought it was self-discovery. Empowerment. A phase. I picked up the phone again and powered it on. This time, the screen lit up. No lock screen photo. No notifications previewed. Just a passcode prompt. Of course. I tried her birthday. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. Our daughter's birthday. Locked. My chest tightened painfully. She'd built a whole world that didn't include us. A world with its own rules, its own access codes. A world I wasn't invited into. You planned this, I whispered. Didn't you? I imagined her choosing this phone, choosing secrecy, choosing to hide it under our daughter's bed because she knew I'd never look there. The cruelty of that choice sank in deeper than the affair itself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Dad. I stared at the name, my vision blurring. For a split second, I considered not answering, protecting myself from whatever he was about to say. But I already knew. I just needed to hear it. Dad, I said, my voice hoarse. There was no pretense this time. No hesitation. You found it, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied. The word felt heavy. Final. He exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, son. The way he said it, steady, controlled, told me this wasn't new information for him. You knew, I said. You knew before today. Yes. The word hit harder than I expected. How long? I asked. Long enough, he replied. Longer than I wanted. I swallowed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't have proof, he said. And because I was hoping, stupidly, that I was wrong. I laughed then. A short, broken sound. Turns out I was the stupid one. No, he said sharply. You were loyal. That made my throat burn. Who is he? I asked. There was a pause. Not a long one. Just enough to tell me he'd been dreading this part. You know him, my father said. The room tilted. No, I said immediately. No, that's not. He works near her office, Dad continued. You've met him once. Maybe twice. My mind scrambled, flipping through faces. Handshakes. Polite smiles. Men, I nodded it without thinking. One face settled in my thoughts, unwelcome and smug. The guy who'd clapped me on the shoulder at that work event and said, Man, you're lucky. Your wife's incredible. The way he'd said it, too familiar, too confident. My jaw tightened. She talked about you, my father added quietly, about how you were always working, always tired, always predictable. Each word landed like a slap. She said that. Yes. I closed my eyes. Predictable. Reliable. The traits I'd worn like a badge had become ammunition against me. Did they? I stopped myself. I didn't need details. The photos had already burned enough into my brain. Yes, my father said anyway. They did. I sat there in silence, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the photos scattered on the carpet like evidence at a crime scene. I gave her everything, I just said finally. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. And this is who she became? I'm sorry, son, my father repeated. I ended the call and sat there until the light shifted outside the window and the room grew dimmer. I gathered the photos with care, my movements slow and deliberate. Proof you couldn't unsee. Truth you couldn't put back under the bed once it was out. Chapter 4, looking back at the man I was. I didn't put the photos back under the bed right away. I carried them with me to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor as if the wood grain might rearrange itself into something that made sense. The house felt different now, not hostile, not loud, just indifferent, like it had already accepted what I was still fighting. I thought about the man I used to be, not the kid fresh out of college with big plans and no sleep schedule, not the newlywed who thought love alone could solve anything. I meant the man I became in the middle years, the one who showed up every day, whether he felt like it or not. The man who learned to swallow exhaustion and call it responsibility. I used to leave the house before the sun came up. Coffee in a travel mug, tie crooked until I fixed it at the first red light. I remember kissing her forehead while she slept, whispering, "Love you," even when she didn't stir. I told myself it counted anyway. I worked late. I took on extra projects. I said no to drinks after work because I wanted to get home, even if home mostly meant collapsing on the couch while she scrolled through her phone beside me. I missed trips, missed birthdays with friends, missed chances to be something more exciting than dependable. I told myself that was the trade. I'm doing this for us, I'd say when she complained about my hours. And she'd smile, tilt her head, and reply, I know. I appreciate it. I believed her. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf, my fingers brushing spines I hadn't touched in years. Photo albums sat on the bottom shelf. I pulled one out and flipped it open, the plastic pages sticking together slightly. There we were, us at the beach, sunburned and laughing. Us holding our daughter for the first time, both of us terrified and proud. Me standing behind her at some work event, hand resting lightly on her waist. She'd leaned into me then, like it was instinct. When did she stop leaning? I remember the first time I felt it, that subtle shift I couldn't name at the time. We were at dinner, just the two of us. I've been talking about a problem at work, something I was trying to solve. Halfway through my sentence, I realized she wasn't listening. Her eyes were on her phone, her smile faint, distracted. "Did you hear what I said?" I'd asked, trying to sound casual. She'd looked up, annoyed. "You always talk about work." I'd apologized, changed the subject. Let go. I let a lot of things go. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, staring at the spot where her mug had been earlier. I remembered how she used to wait up for me, how we used to sit at this very counter late at night, sharing leftovers, talking about nothing. Somewhere along the way, her nights filled up with other things, other people. Temptation didn't crash into her life all at once. I could see that now. It seeped in through cracks I'd ignored. Compliments she wasn't getting from me because I assumed she already knew how I felt. Attention she got elsewhere while I was busy being steady. Predictable. The word echoed again. I thought predictability was a virtue. My father certainly did. "Be the man people can count on," he used to say. Flash fades. Character doesn't. But character didn't get texts at midnight that made her smile. Character didn't make her feel seen when she wanted to feel desired instead of appreciated. I sat down at the table and rubbed my hands together slowly, like I was warming them over an invisible fire. I replayed arguments we'd had over the past year, ones that felt small at the time. Her saying I wasn't present, me saying I was exhausted, her rolling her eyes when I said I was doing my best. "You don't even notice me anymore," she'd said once. I'd replied, "I notice everything. I just don't have the energy to talk about it all the time." She'd gone quiet after that. Not angry, just distant. I mistook silence for peace. I walked down the hallway to our bedroom and stood in the doorway. Our bed was neatly made, pillows arranged the way she liked them. I imagined her lying here, texting someone else while I showered, while I slept. I imagined the ease with which she'd compartmentalized me. Husband here, secret there. What hurt most wasn't the sex. It was the replacement. The realization that while I was giving her stability, she was giving someone else her excitement. While I was carrying the weight, she was sharing the spark. I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed quietly to myself. I thought love was enough, I said to the empty room. Turns out it was just convenient. I remembered opportunities I'd turned down, jobs in other cities, chances to take risks. "Not now," I'd said. "We need consistency." I'd built my life around us, and she'd slowly built hers around someone else. Taken for granted. The phrase settled into my bones. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. Anger requires energy, and I felt hollowed out. What I felt instead was grief for the man who believed loyalty was a shield, for the man who thought showing up was the same as being chosen. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old messages between us. Good mornings. Inside jokes. Plans we never followed through on. Somewhere in the timeline, the warmth cooled. Replies got shorter. Emojis replaced words. I locked the phone and set it face down. "I was there," I said quietly. I was always there. And somehow, that hadn't been enough. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, watching the fan spin lazily. Time passed without meaning. Outside, a car drove by. Somewhere, a dog barked. Life went on, indifferent to the collapse happening inside my chest. I closed my eyes and let myself mourn, not just the marriage, but the version of myself that believed sacrifice would always be rewarded. Chapter 5, The Cocky Truth Comes Out. I didn't rush. That surprised me most about myself. I'd always thought if something like this happened, I'd explode, yell, throw something, confront her immediately. But rage, I was learning, had layers. The first layer was heat. The second was clarity, and clarity demanded patience. I waited until the house was quiet again, until the daylight thinned and the shadows grew longer. I went back to my daughter's room, and pulled the pouch out from under the bed with the same care someone uses to handle evidence. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, and plugged the phone into a charger. "Let's see who you really are," I said softly. The screen lit up after a few minutes. Still locked. Still smug in its silence. I tried again, different codes this time. Patterns. Dates that mattered to her, not us. The year she started her current job. The street number of her office. Unlocked. I stared at the home screen, my heart beating steadily now, like it had accepted its role. The apps were minimal. No social media icons. No games. Just messages. Calls. A few photos. Efficient. Purpose-built. I opened the messages. The name at the top wasn't a real one. Just an initial. One letter. Clean. Careless. The thread scrolled longer than my screen could show. I read slowly, deliberately, forcing myself not to skim. If I was going to know, I was going to know. The tone jumped out first. Familiarity. Ease. Confidence. Not flirtation. That came later, but comfort. Jokes that landed without explanation. Complaints about work. About me. "He's so predictable," one message read. "I swear, he lives on autopilot." Another followed. "That's why you're here," he replied. "You need someone who actually sees you." I felt my jaw tighten, but my hand stayed steady. There it was. The echo of my father's words. Predictable. Use again, this time with a wink attached to it. I scrolled. They talked about timing. About how careful they had to be. About how easy it was, too. "He never checks this room," she'd written once. "It's perfect." My eyes lifted instinctively toward the hallway, toward my daughter's room. A cold wave rolled through me. Perfect. Another message popped out, bold in its arrogance. "Relax," he typed. "Guys like him don't look too closely. They're too busy being good husbands." I let out a breath through my nose, slow and controlled. "So that's what you think," I murmured. I clicked into the photos. Nothing explicit. They didn't need to be. A shot of 2 coffee cups on a familiar counter, my counter. A reflection in a mirror I recognized from our hallway. Her laugh captured mid-motion, head thrown back, joy unfiltered. In my house. I stood up so abruptly the chair scraped loudly against the floor. I paced the kitchen, phone in hand, adrenaline humming beneath my skin. They hadn't just met in neutral places. They'd crossed lines deliberately, boldly, like they wanted to prove something. I remember Saturday, a few months back, when she'd insisted I take our daughter to my parents' place alone. "You two should have some bonding time," she'd said brightly. "I've got errands." Errands. I scrolled back to that date. "He's gone for a few hours," she'd texted him. "Come over." The room felt smaller. I went back to the messages, further down, deeper into the rot. There were voice notes, too. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice filled the kitchen, light, amused, intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. "He tries," she was saying. Laughter threaded through the words. I'll give him that. But it's exhausting being with someone who thinks effort is the same as passion. A male voice responded, smooth and amused. "That's because he's safe. And safe gets boring." I turned the phone face down, my palm pressing hard against the table. They hadn't just cheated. They judged, reduced me, turned my loyalty into a punchline. I picked the phone back up and continued, because stopping now would only leave room for denial to crawl back in. More messages. More jokes at my expense. More casual cruelty. "He won't leave," she'd written once. "He doesn't have it in him." That one stayed with me. I sat back down and laughed quietly, the sound sharp and humorless. "You really thought that?" I said. "You really believed that?" I checked the call log. The number came up often. Very often. I copied it and opened my own phone, searching my contacts. There it was. A name I recognized immediately. The guy from that work mixer. The one who'd been overly friendly. The one who'd looked at her a second too long when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The one who'd said, "Man, you're lucky." I remember the tone now. The confidence. The way he'd smiled like he knew something I didn't. I stood there in the kitchen, both phones in my hands, feeling something shift inside me. The humiliation was still there, raw, undeniable, but it was being edged out by something sharper. They hadn't been careful because they were afraid of me. They'd been careful because they thought they were smarter. I took screenshots, saved copies, documented everything. Each tap of the screen felt like laying another brick in a wall I hadn't planned on building, but would see through to the end. When I was done, I put the phone back in the pouch and returned it to its hiding place under the bed. Exactly as I'd found it. Let them keep believing in their cleverness a little longer. I washed my hands at the sink, watching the water run clear, then shut off the light in the kitchen and stood there in the dimness. My chest felt tight, but my thoughts were steady now. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. Chapter 6, The Mask Slips. I heard her keys before I saw her. The familiar jingle at the front door used to bring a strange kind of comfort, a signal that the day was shifting into evening, that the house would no longer feel so hollow. This time, it sent a quiet jolt through me, sharp and unwelcome. I was sitting at the dining table, a glass of water untouched in front of me, pretending to scroll through my phone. I didn't look up right away. The door opened, closed. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood. "I'm home," she called out, light and cheerful, like she was stepping into a role she knew by heart. "In here," I replied. She appeared in the doorway, purse on her shoulder, hair just slightly out of place in a way that looked intentional. She smiled when she saw me, a practiced smile, warm, but not quite reaching her eyes. "Hey," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her lips brushed my skin. Quick, careful. Every touch felt rehearsed. "You're late," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She shrugged, setting her purse down. "Long day. Meetings ran over." "Must have been important," I said. She laughed softly. "You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I just knew something else now, too. She walked into the kitchen, opening cabinets, moving around like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't spent the afternoon mocking me through a second phone hidden under our daughter's bed. I watched her the way you watch someone on stage, aware of the performance, alert to the cracks. "Did you eat?" she asked. "No, I can make something quick," she offered, already reaching for a pan. I shook my head. "I'm not that hungry." She paused, glanced back at me. "Everything okay?" There it was. The concern. Timed perfectly. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." She nodded, accepting it easily. Too easily. She poured herself a glass of wine, leaning against the counter as she took the first sip. I noticed how relaxed she looked. Comfortable. Like the weight of secrets wasn't heavy at all when you carry them long enough. I decided to test the water. "How was your day, really?" I asked. She smiled again. "Busy. Same as always." "Anyone new at work?" I added casually. She didn't hesitate. "A few contractors. Nothing interesting." "Nothing interesting." I nodded, pretending to believe her, and felt something twist inside my chest. She passed the test without effort. No pause. No stumble. She'd told these lies before, probably to herself as much as to me. She came and sat across from me, crossing her legs. "You're quiet tonight." "I've been thinking," I said. "About what?" "Us." Her expression softened instantly. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. It felt wrong, like a prop. "We're fine," she said gently. "You worry too much." "Fine." I looked down at our hands, at the familiar ring on her finger. I wondered if she ever twisted it off before touching him, if she ever forgot to put it back on. "Do you still like working late?" I asked. She frowned slightly. "What kind of question is that?" "Just curious," I said. "You used to complain about it." She laughed. "People change." That was true. People did change. Sometimes so slowly you didn't notice until they were unrecognizable. She stood up and walked over to me, sliding onto my lap like she'd done 1,000 times before. Her arms wrapped around my neck. Her perfume filled my senses, familiar, comforting, nauseating. "You've been distant," she murmured. Did I do something? The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "No," I said quietly. "I just feel out of sync lately." She studied my face, searching for something. Guilt? Suspicion? Whatever she was looking for. She didn't find it. "You're overthinking again," she said, pressing her forehead to mine. "We're good. Trust me." Trust. I swallowed hard. She kissed me then, longer this time, deliberate. I stayed still, letting it happen, counting the seconds until she pulled away. "There," she said, smiling. "Better." I nodded. Inside, something cracked. She moved away, turning on the TV, Flipping through channels like the world was exactly as it should be. I watched her from across the room and realized the truth settling into place with a quiet finality. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't guilty. She wasn't afraid. She was comfortable. Comfortable lying. Comfortable touching me after touching someone else. Comfortable believing she was in control. And I had never felt more alone sitting next to the woman I married. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. I chose the moment carefully, not because I wanted to protect her, but because I wanted the truth unfiltered by panic. I waited until the house was quiet again, until our daughter was asleep and the television murmured softly in the background, filling the space with noise that pretended to be normal. She was folding laundry on the couch, humming under her breath. That was the moment that almost broke me. I stood in the doorway for a second, watching her fold my shirt with practiced hands, aligning the sleeves just the way she always had. The intimacy of it, of her caring for something that belonged to me, felt obscene now. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up, mildly annoyed. "Can't wait? I'm almost done." "No," I replied. "It can't." Something in my voice must have shifted because she straightened, setting the shirt aside. "Okay," she said cautiously. "What's going on?" I walked into the room and placed the black leather pouch on the coffee table between us. She froze, just for half a second. Then her face smoothed out, confusion sliding neatly into place. "What's that?" "You tell me," I said. She laughed lightly. "Why would I know?" I sat down across from her. "Because I found it under our daughter's bed." That did it. Her breath caught. Not enough to be obvious, but enough. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Why were you?" I unzipped the pouch and slid the phone onto the table. Silence stretched. Her eyes dropped to it, then lifted back to me. Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't." She crossed her arms, defensive now. "You're snooping. You're invading my privacy. Do you have any idea how insane this looks?" I leaned forward. "Do you have any idea how insane it is to hide a second phone under our daughter's bed?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Her jaw tightened. "That phone isn't what you think," she said. "Then unlock it," I replied, pushing it toward her. She didn't touch it. Instead, she scoffed. "You're being paranoid. You always do this. Jump to conclusions. Assume the worst. It's exhausting." There it was. The turn. I pulled my phone out and tapped the screen, sliding it toward her. Screenshots filled the display. Messages. Dates. Photos she didn't know I'd seen. Her face drained of color. She stared at the screen for a long time. Too long. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "You went through everything? You went through our marriage," I said. "I just follow the trail." Her laughter faded. Her eyes hardened. "You don't get to act surprised," she said sharply. "Not after everything." "Everything," I echoed. "You were never here," she shot back. "You were always tired, always working, always checked out." I felt invisible. I stood up. "So you slept with someone else?" She stood too. "I found someone who listened." "In my house," I said. "In our home." She shrugged. Actually shrugged. "You weren't using it." The words hit like a punch to the ribs. "Say that again," I said quietly. She lifted her chin. "I said you weren't present. You weren't a partner. You were a routine." "A routine." I laughed once, harsh and disbelieving. "You had a phone under our kid's bed." "Don't bring her into this," she snapped. "You already did," I said. "Every time you chose him." She turned away, pacing now, hands in her hair. "I didn't plan for this to happen." "But you let it," I replied. She spun back toward me. "Because it felt good to be wanted. Because for once, someone looked at me like I mattered." "I looked at you," I said. "I built my life around you." She scoffed. "You built a schedule, not a relationship." I stepped closer. "Did you ever plan to stop?" She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. "I love him," she said suddenly. The words rushed out, defensive, sharp. "There. You wanted the truth. I love him." Something in me went very still. "How long?" I asked. "Long enough," she said. "Longer than you think." "Did you ever love me?" I asked. She looked at me then, not cruel, not kind, just honest. "I loved what you provided," she said. "I love the safety. But him? He makes me feel alive." Alive. I nodded slowly, absorbing it. "So I was the foundation," I said. And he was the escape. She didn't deny it. You replaced me, I said. She exhaled. I moved on. The room felt like it was collapsing inward, but my mind had never been clearer. You didn't just cheat, I said. You rewrote our marriage while I was still living in it. She folded her arms again, posture casual now, almost relieved. I wasn't happy, she said, and I deserve happiness. I stared at her, the woman I defended, trusted, chosen every day, and finally saw her without the mask. You deserve honesty, I said, and you couldn't even give me that. She didn't answer. I picked up the pouch, zipped it closed, and held it in my hand like something dead. We're done, I said. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to decide that alone. I looked at her, calm and unflinching. I already did. She laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. You'll never leave, she said. You don't have it in you. I met her gaze and said nothing, because I finally understood something she never would. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd freed me. Chapter 8. Choosing dignity over destruction. I didn't sleep that night, not because my mind was racing, but because it had finally gone still, the kind of stillness that comes after a decision has been made. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan as it cut slow circles through the dark, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere down the hall, my daughter breathed softly in her sleep. That sound anchored me. Whatever happened next, she came first. Not my anger, not my pride, not the urge to burn everything down just to feel warm again. I got out of bed quietly and went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly, like I was practicing restraint. My hands were steady. My reflection in the window looked older than it had a week ago, but clearer. Don't be stupid, I said to myself. Be precise. I sat at the table and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was organize everything. Screenshots sorted by date. Messages labeled. Photos time-stamped. Call logs exported. I wrote notes in plain language, no emotion attached. Just facts. Times. Places. Patterns. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation. When the sun came up, I made breakfast like I always did. Pancakes. Fruit cut small. My daughter wandered in, rubbing her eyes. Morning, Dad, she said. Morning, kiddo. I replied, smiling because she deserved that much. Hungry. She nodded, climbing into her chair. My wife didn't come into the kitchen. She'd slept in the guest room. The distance felt appropriate now, physical proof of a line already crossed. I packed my daughter's lunch, double-checking everything like I always had. When I drove her to school, I kept my voice light, asked about her day, reminded her I'd be there after work. When she closed the car door and waved, I waited until she was inside before exhaling. Then I got to work. I called my father first. I'm handling it, I said. I figured you would, he replied. You okay? I will be. A pause. Then, that's my boy. I contacted a lawyer next. Not dramatic. Not angry. Professional. I laid out the situation calmly. Evidence. Child involved. Need to proceed cleanly. You're doing the right thing by not escalating, she told me. This kind of restraint protects you. Protects my daughter, I thought. I hung up and made another call, this one to the HR department at her company. I didn't accuse. I didn't rant. I asked about their policies regarding undisclosed relationships and conflicts of interest. Why do you ask? The woman said. Because I have documentation, I replied evenly, and I want to make sure I submit it appropriately. There was a shift in her tone then. Cautious. Attentive. I didn't send anything yet. Timing mattered. That afternoon, my wife finally approached me. She stood in the doorway of the office, arms crossed, eyes sharp. So what now? She asked. You going to play the silent martyr? No, I said without looking up. I'm going to play the adult. She scoffed. You think this makes you look strong? I met her gaze then. Calm. Unmoved. I don't care how it looks. I care how it ends. She hesitated. Just a flicker. And she masked it. You can't destroy my life just because you're hurt, she said. I'm not destroying anything, I replied. I'm letting the truth do what it does. That night, I sent the first email. Not to everyone, just to the right person. Attach files. Clear subject line. No commentary. The response came faster than I expected. The next day, his confidence cracked. I didn't see it firsthand, but I heard about it. Through a mutual acquaintance who called me. Voice low. Man, I don't know what you did, he said, but that guy? He's spiraling. Pulled into meetings. Pulled off projects. Acting like he's waiting for the floor to drop out. I said nothing. Later that evening, my wife came home pale, eyes darting. Did you contact my work? She demanded. I contacted the truth. I said. You had no right. I had every right. I interrupted. You involved our family. Our home. Our child. She paced the room. He said they might fire him. I shrugged. Actions have consequences. Her voice dropped. You planned this. Yes, I said simply. She stopped pacing and stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I didn't think you were capable of this, she said. That's the problem, I replied. You never really looked at me. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then again. Her shoulders sagged. What did you tell them? She asked quietly. Enough. She sank onto the couch, suddenly unsure. You're enjoying this. No, I said. I'm finishing it. Silence filled the room. Not tense this time. Final. I underestimated you, she said. Yes, I replied. You did. I want to check on my daughter, tucking her in, reading her a story like nothing had changed. Because for her, nothing had to yet. When I turned off the light and closed her door, I felt something solid settle into place inside me. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I hadn't lost control. And that terrified them far more than any explosion ever could. Chapter 9. The Fall and the Rise. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, emails unanswered, calls not returned, doors quietly closing. Consequences rarely announce themselves. They accumulate until the weight becomes undeniable. My wife felt it first. She stopped leaving early for work. Stopped dressing with that confident edge she'd worn like a second skin. The laughter disappeared from her phone calls, replaced by clipped replies and long silences. One evening she came home without saying a word, set her bag down, and stared at the wall like she was waiting for it to speak. They reassigned me, she said finally. I looked up from the paperwork spread across the table. To where? Nowhere important, she snapped. Then, softer, they're reviewing everything. I nodded. That's usually how it starts. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. There was no ground left to stand on. A week later, she lost more. Friends stopped inviting her out. The same women who'd once laughed with her at dinners suddenly had reasons, kids sick, schedules full. At school events, conversations ended quickly when she approached. Whispers traveled faster than apologies ever could. One night, she asked, Did you tell them? I didn't look up. I didn't have to. Her reputation had been built on perception, on being admired, on appearing put together. Once that cracked, the pieces fell where they may. She tried anger next. You're enjoying this, she accused one morning, eyes sharp, voice brittle. No, I said calmly. I'm surviving it. She scoffed. You think you're some kind of hero now? I think I'm honest, I replied. That's enough. The affair partner vanished from her life as quickly as he'd entered it. His confidence, once so loud in those messages, evaporated under scrutiny. He stopped calling, stopped texting. When she confronted him, she came home shaking. He won't even talk to me, she said. He says this is too much. I said nothing. That was the moment it hit her, the difference between secrecy and reality, between thrill and consequence. She'd mistaken attention for loyalty, and now she was alone. Meanwhile, I rebuilt, not dramatically, not overnight, brick by brick, like I'd built everything else. I joined a gym, not to punish my body, but to reclaim it. Early mornings became mine again. The burn of my muscles felt honest, earned. I watched myself get stronger, week by week, and with it came something quieter but deeper, confidence rooted in discipline, not validation. I cleaned up my finances, cut waste, redirected energy. I worked with purpose instead of obligation. Opportunities I'd once dismissed came back into focus, and this time I said yes. I spent more time with my daughter. Real time. We cooked together, walked after dinner, talked about school, about her dreams, about nothing at all. She didn't need explanations, just presence. And for the first time in years, I had that to give. On a Sunday afternoon, I drove to see my father. He was in the garage, tinkering with an old toolbox when I arrived. He looked up, smiled, and wiped his hands on a rag. "You look different," he said. "Feel different," I replied. We sat on the porch, two men watching the day move slowly. He didn't press. He never did. When I finally spoke, it came easily. "I thought being dependable was enough," I said. "Turns out it was just invisible." He nodded. "Dependable is powerful," he said, "but only when it's respected. Otherwise, it's just taken." "I won't let that happen again," I said. He smiled. "I know. Back home, the house felt lighter. Not because it was happier, but because it was honest. There were hard conversations. Legal ones. Quiet ones. My wife oscillated between regret and resentment. But something fundamental had shifted. She no longer looked at me like she had leverage. One evening, she stood in the doorway and said, "I never thought you'd walk away." "I didn't walk away," I replied. "I walked forward." She had nothing to say to that. Pain didn't disappear. Some nights it still crept in, memories, doubts, questions with no answers. But pain, I learned, doesn't have to destroy you. It can refine you if you let it. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I gave to someone who couldn't value it. I stopped apologizing for being solid, for being steady, for being a man who chose responsibility over excitement. The victory wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was waking up without dread. It was standing tall without explanation. And it was knowing deep in my bones that I would never abandon myself again. Chapter 10. What Loyalty Really Means. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in soft golden streaks, painting the living room in quiet warmth. I sat at the edge of the couch, coffee steaming in my hands, staring at nothing and everything all at once. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. My daughter had left it that way while helping me tidy up the day before. Her laughter still echoed in the corners, and I let it. It belonged to her, to life moving forward, not to the memories of pain. I thought about the months that had passed, the slow unraveling, the confrontation, the strategic rebuilding. Each step had been deliberate, calculated, necessary. I hadn't rushed. I hadn't given in to anger, even when the impulse screamed in my chest. Not once had I allowed bitterness to dictate my actions. That control, that self-possession, was worth more than any fleeting sense of revenge I might have imagined. I sipped my coffee and let my mind drift back over everything. The subtle hints I'd missed, the smile that had seemed too practiced, the small excuses, the long hours she suddenly claimed were for work. I remembered her confidence, that reckless, cocky swagger she used like armor, and how I'd chosen to believe in love, in loyalty, in the idea that devotion would protect what mattered. But devotion alone had never been enough. Not for her. Not when she craved attention and thrill over stability and care. And yet, in that betrayal, I found clarity. Betrayal doesn't destroy the loyal. It reveals the weak foundations of those who take loyalty for granted. I glanced at the framed photo on the mantel. My daughter on her first day of school, smiling at the camera, backpack too big for her shoulders. I remembered how I held her hand, steady and unshakable, that morning. I had been present when it counted most, when no one else could step in. That was loyalty. That was integrity. Not staying blindly, not tolerating disrespect, but standing firm in values that defined who I was. The past months had been a test. A gauntlet of patience, restraint, and self-respect. I had watched as my wife's world crumbled quietly around her. I had watched the affair partner's arrogance fade under scrutiny. And through it all, I had remained steady, not because I wanted to punish, but because I wanted to survive, to rebuild, and to be better. I thought of the conversations with my father, the quiet counsel he offered, the way he never told me what to do, but reminded me of who I had always been. Strength isn't in fighting someone else, he had said, polishing a tool in his garage. Strength is in holding yourself together when the world expects you to break. I remembered his words vividly now, seeing them materialize in every choice I had made since discovering the truth. I stood and moved to the window, looking out at the street. Neighbors waved as their children raced by on bikes. Life moved, indifferent to pain, indifferent to betrayal. And that was the point. The world kept turning. Only I could decide whether to keep myself fractured or rise above. The idea of revenge had tempted me at first. A loud, fiery, satisfying vengeance. But vengeance is fleeting. It leaves scars, not lessons. I had chosen instead the quiet power of dignity. Documenting, exposing strategically, reclaiming control without giving in to chaos. That had been my real victory. I thought about the woman I once loved. The wife I had trusted implicitly. She had underestimated me. Thought I would bend, break, or beg. She had assumed loyalty meant submission. But loyalty is not submission. Loyalty is integrity. And integrity demands respect, first from yourself, then from anyone who enters your life. I poured a second cup of coffee and sat back down at the table, letting my mind trace the arc of the past months. The grief, the anger, the humiliation, they had all been transformed into something quieter, stronger. I could still feel the sting of her betrayal, but it no longer had the power to dictate my moods or my actions. Pain had taught me to sharpen my boundaries, to understand my worth, to honor myself. I remembered her last attempt to manipulate me, the casual arrogance, the way she thought she could sway me with charm or feigned remorse. It had failed because I had changed. I had learned that respect could not be demanded, it must be earned. And she had abandoned hers the moment she chose another. My daughter bounded into the room, yanking at my sleeve. "Dad, let's go ride our bikes," she said, bright and insistent. I smiled and set my coffee down. "All right," I said, feeling the warmth of purpose again. "Let's ride." Outside, the air was crisp and invigorating. The wind caught my hair as we pedaled down the street, laughter mixing with the hum of tires on asphalt. My chest felt light, steady. The world was alive around me, vibrant and unrelenting. And I was present, not for anyone else's approval, not for any illusion of perfection, but because I had earned a right to live fully, honestly, and without compromise. I thought about loyalty one last time as I watched my daughter wheel ahead, her laughter bright in the sunlight. Loyalty isn't staying when it harms you. Loyalty isn't blind devotion. Loyalty is choosing to uphold what is right, to honor integrity, and to protect those who depend on you. I breathed in, letting the wind clear the residue of bitterness and grief from my mind. I had been tested. I had been hurt. But I had survived. I had risen. And now, looking down the street at the life I was actively building, I understood it fully. I understood what mattered, what endured, and what could never be taken from me. She thought betrayal would make her feel alive. Losing her taught me something better. Self-respect always outlives desire.